Yeah, just a quick review of the book. I Tore My Knee Meniscus, Now What? By Jim Johnson, PT. The book hasn't been out too long, but it's one of there just really aren't that many good meniscus books. Like if you've tore your meniscus and you want to know, like, what do I do? What are my options? There really aren't that many good ones. And this one I like in particular because it covers all the bases. And most importantly of all, it's not really just what the author thinks, it's basically just evidence based. It's what the research says about certain things about tearing your meniscus. So, real briefly, book starts out, I think, as it should, with a little bit of anatomy. So, what exactly is a meniscus? So, a lot of people don't know what it is, what it does. Good to know because, say, if the treatment is to take out part of it, if you know what it does, then you'll know, hey, that's not such a good idea because this happens. But anyway, lots of pictures in this book, dozens and dozens of pictures. If you're a visual learner, you really like it. It's really not dry reading at all. It's actually for the layperson, so you don't have to worry about a bunch of medical jargon and walking away like what was that? A tear is not a tear is not a tear. Basically, the purpose of this chapter is to show you that just because you tear your knee meniscus, and this is with a lot of other things, like people have like back pain or, they tear their meniscus, and first thing they think of is somebody else they knew that had that same problem, like, oh, I know Joe, he tore his meniscus and he needed surgery. So the whole point is this chapter is just to go over the different types of tears, and because where the tear is and how much is torn, the different types of tears, they're all have different treatments. Like well, especially depending on like healing times. Like if you tear here, in a certain spot in the meniscus, it can heal. If you tear another place, it might not be able to heal. It might lend itself to surgery very well. So things you need to know about and how they classify tears. What to do, the options. Basically, what this book does is it's a question and answer format. For instance, should we just take the whole thing out? And then what happens if you take the whole thing out? What results do you get from that? Here again, this book is heavily evidence-based. Each of these boxes is a study put out in layman's terms so you can understand the study. And basically, say, as an instance, here, 300 people that underwent a total meniscectomy. That's where they just took the whole thing out. It's torn. Hey, let's just take the whole thing out. What happens over time? They followed these people for 40 years, and then they found out what happened to them over time. So here again, that's how they answer these questions. What about taking part of it out? That's what the thinking is these days. Is mainly just taking, just part of it out as opposed to the whole thing. Mainly because if you start messing with the meniscus and you start removing pieces of it, it changes the contact forces between the two bones in your knee. And you get early arthritis is what you get. So here again, you take this group here, took a bunch of people that had a partial meniscectomy, followed them for 5 to 12 years, found out what happened to their knees. What did they look like after 5 to 10 years? What about trying to repair it? What happens there? Talk a little bit about that. What if I just leave it alone and do nothing? So here again, you got to look at the studies where they take a bunch of people that had a meniscus tear, and for some reason or another, they just didn't do anything about it. And then these researchers followed them over time to see what happens. So here again, answers you want to know. Let's see. What about exercise? So this is really good. Exercise versus surgery. Which one is better? Well, so here again, the only way you're going to answer that question, evidence-based book, is you're going to look at the randomized controlled trials. That's the highest form of proof in medicine that a treatment is effective. So if you want to test something in medicine, like a pill or a surgery, you're going to do a randomized controlled trial. Basically, this is where you take, say, 100 people with a torn meniscus, 50 you'd randomly assign to surgery, the other 50 you'd randomly assign to having a good exercise program, and then you follow them over time and you see what happens to them. So it goes over the different, if you do a partial meniscectomy compared to exercise, if you have like a traumatic tear, compared to exercise, what about a root tear? And that, make a long story short, especially with partial meniscectomies, the literature is pretty consistent. Whether you have surgery or whether you do a good exercise program, you're going to end up at the same place. Even a lot of studies showing that even traumatic tears can actually improve with exercise. So anyway, good evidence-based. So if you decide, you go to a surgeon, they say, hey, I can do this. Well, you can see how does that compare to exercise program. A few tips to make things go easier. It's not uncommon for people just to tear their meniscus by just bending down and, picking something up. And they, usually that's a degenerative tear. It's a little weak to begin with. And then they can hardly walk. So here again, if that's you, it shows you how to use a cane, how to go upstairs, get out of a chair. It goes over icing your knee, how to get rid of inflammation, which you'll have initially. And then ends with an exercise program. There's 3 different levels: a beginning, intermediate, and advanced. So if you just have an acute tear, you can hardly move your knee. It's got an exercise program for that. If you can do a little bit more with your knee, or you want to look to prevent a problem, you can use the intermediate or advanced one. So here again, I think to sum it up, I tore my knee meniscus, now what? This book will answer that question. So definitely, if you tore your knee meniscus and you want to try exercise, or you want to know what your options are and what will happen to you over time, I think this is a great resource. So definitely check it out.